Hey, Bulls and Bears, we are back. My name is JJ. You're watching Bull, Boom, Bear, Bust, back with another financial economic news report, back with another dose of economic reality. And all the concerning news that I've been bringing you regarding the economy, the financial situation with most Americans, I guess all that is no longer a concern to anybody because we have this awesome jobs number that just came out that says that pretty much everything's fine. And I guess, like the Lego movie, everything is awesome. Let's take a look here at this news. And here is the good news, and everybody's celebrating this apparently because I look at all the business news channels and everybody's touting these awesome numbers, right? Jobs report shows an increase of 517,000 in January for jobs added, payrolls. Crushing expectations, unemployment rate hit a 53-year low. So everybody's happy. No one has any debt to worry about. Apparently, with all these jobs, everybody's going to go pay off all their credit card balances, and there's not going to be any more problems. All these millions of people that are behind on their car loans, they're going to go ahead and get caught up here because all these awesome, excellent, fantastic job numbers mean that everyone's going to be back on solid footing for their personal financial situation. All right, folks, we'll get more into the numbers here. First of all, if you believe these numbers, then you probably believe I've got a story for you. So I saw the Tooth Fairy sitting at a table with the Easter Bunny, and they were playing cards, and they were having a conversation. The Tooth Fairy was complaining about inflation because the kids, that lose their teeth, they put the tooth under their pillow. They no longer want $1 for the tooth. Now they want $5, they want $10 because of inflation. And the Easter Bunny had a similar complaint. The cost of eggs, the Easter Bunny might not even deliver eggs this year because the cost of eggs is outrageous. The Easter Bunny was telling the Tooth Fairy that people need to use plastic eggs because the cost of real eggs is just too crazy. So if you believe these jobs numbers, you believe that story. All right, but let's get into the numbers here. First of all, what are jobs added? Well, when someone goes and takes two part-time jobs, that's two jobs added. It's pretty simple, right? So that's one thing. But then there's more to it because jobs added also doesn't subtract the newly unemployed people. Now, then you say, well, what about the unemployment number? We'll talk about that in a minute. But jobs added doesn't mean that there weren't people that lost their jobs. You see what I'm saying here? And again, we have to recap this because people are asking me quite often, what do these numbers mean? Why do these numbers look so good? Why are people celebrating? It's because of that, because these are cherry-picked numbers. It's manipulated data, right? So somebody working two part-time jobs without benefits is looked at as a good thing, even though that same person may have gotten laid off from their tech company or their tech firm, and they're going from working full-time with full benefits now to working two part-time jobs with no benefits. But that's a good thing, you see, because now there's more jobs in the economy. And I think this headline here out of CNBC that I pulled here shows the other part of the story here. Jiffy Lube, you see that picture right there? Most of these jobs are service sector, leisure, hospitality jobs. So Jiffy Lube, bartenders, waiters, etc. Are these jobs going to be enough to help people get ahead financially? For the most part, no. But apparently, again, looking at the business news, everybody's happy, everybody's celebrating, and I was taking my kid to school earlier. There were people dancing on the sidewalks because of the jobs number. You don't believe that, right? Because it's not true. Because most people aren't feeling this fantastic news. They aren't feeling that themselves and their personal financial situation. All right, so let's dig deeper into the numbers here, and we see that, well, the headline looks pretty good. If we look at the types of jobs being added, not so good. Just as I said here, in January, leisure and hospitality, of those jobs that were added there, 128,000 fell in the leisure and hospitality industries. All right, also government takes up a big chunk there. 74,000 were government jobs. All right, if it weren't for all the borrowing and spending, from the government, these jobs may not even be in existence. Now, let's look at jobs that actually produce actual items, not just services, not somebody, serving you a drink, but actually producing maybe something real, like a home or maybe manufactured items, vehicles, for example. We go all the way down here, manufacturing, only 19,000. jobs added. Construction, only 25,000 jobs added. So as far as producing real life goods and items, those are a tiny percentage of the overall jobs added. All right, so the trend is continuing, and that's the trend that bad news is actually being touted as good news. But this is what we see throughout history here, as far as how we look at these numbers, the economic situation. People running up their credit cards, going further into debt, that's a good thing because that's looked at as economic growth. They call that economic growth, with the GDP number, being highly impacted by that. And sure, if you're just looking at profits from these companies, then that's a good thing. And so then you can justify people going into debt and giving money to these businesses, and their stock goes up, and the businesses use the profits to buy back their own stock. And for the most part, still not paying enough for people to keep up with the cost of living. So therefore, you have to have all these assistance programs, rescue programs, prevention programs, where they're talking about a nationwide rent protection program. We still have about 20 million people under a utility payback plan because they can't afford their monthly utilities. So if you look at nationwide, they had to stop charging late fees, and with about 20 million households, they had to stop charging these extra fees, adjust their utility bills, try to even out the utility bills for even monthly payments, repayment plans for utility bills. 20 million households, that's still happening right now. That hasn't changed. So if these jobs numbers were so good, why are we not seeing these other areas where people are struggling? Why are we not seeing those areas change in reverse? Right. So these assistance programs, these prevention programs, are going to get bigger and escalate. And I predicted this last year. I said they're going to have to implement more and more of these programs. And it wasn't surprising to me at all that in January it came out that the White House is looking at a nationwide rent program to cap rents, and a lot more is being done in that to try to help people that can't pay their rent. And we have to ask ourselves, what's next? Are they going to start just printing money and giving it directly to the landlords to make up for the fact that all these people can't pay their rents? Because what we're seeing now is landlords raising rent on the people that are paying to make up for the people that aren't paying. And that's just one of the reasons why we, over the past few years, saw rents increase by record amounts, record increases in rents. It's no coincidence. It's not just that one day all the landlords woke up and decided to be greedy, right? So January rolls around, January of last year, all the landlords woke up and said, oh, I want to be greedy. I want to raise my rents. No, they're doing it for a reason. They're doing it is because they're not getting rent from some tenants. So now they're going to make up for it in other areas. Also, the high cost of homes, that's part of it as well. But yeah, that's what's going on. But let's take a look at some other news here today and try to give you some more economic reality on some other things here that are happening. Take a look at this right here. Just pull a headline here out of CNBC. U.S. credit card debt jumps 18.5% and hit a record $930 billion. So we're almost at $1 trillion in credit card debt. And these increases in debt are setting records every quarter, right? So if so many great and fantastic jobs were being added to the economy, why would people be running up debt so rapidly still? Also, from that same article and other news sources that I looked at, delinquencies continue to increase for the credit card payments. And the typical balance now on these credit cards, if people made their minimum payment, the typical balance would be 17 years to pay it off at the current interest rate. 17 years. And that's only if people didn't take on any additional debt. But if you look at the additional debt that's being added pretty much every day, and we look at it every quarter, it gets worse, it gets higher, it's going to be even more. So pretty soon it's going to be 20 years to pay it off, 25 years, and pretty much it's going to be millions of people in the bankruptcy line. And I guess if you have to look at one area of the economy, one sector that's going to be growing here in 2023, I think it's going to be bankruptcy attorneys, because that's the direction that things are headed. All right, so how do we use this news to our advantage? People say, yeah, JJ, you don't have any solutions. You're telling us, the economic reality. We know that the numbers are not what they're put out there as reality. We know what the situation is and why these numbers look the way they look. But how can we use this to our benefit? Well, knowing what's happening here, you can kind of plan looking forward pretty far ahead. So we know that there's not going to be an amazing economy going forward. So if you have a job today, maybe plan for not having that job, and not to be negative or doom and gloom, but prepare for a worst case scenario. What's going to happen if you lose your job? Will you be under a huge mortgage because you just went out and bought a home this year? Right. And I'm not telling anyone that it's not a good time to buy a home. There's certain parts of the countries where it's a great time to buy a home. If you're in Iowa, if you're in Indiana, Kentucky, I mean, a lot of rural areas, it's still very affordable now to buy a home right now today, even when you look at the cost of what it's going to cost to rent. Out here where I'm at in California, and I'm in San Diego, compared to rents, it's not a good time to buy a home. And I've said this before, if I wouldn't have bought a home many years ago when I first came out here, I probably wouldn't afford a home at today's levels. All right. So it's not as simple as, saying, okay, it's a good time. It's not a good time. For some people, it is in certain locations. For other people in other locations, it may not be a good time. Even in California, it may be a good time for you if you have cash and you're going to get a home now for about 10% lower than what it was at the peak, because home prices have dropped here about 10% in San Diego. I think they're going to come down further. But when you look at the cost of owning a home, those costs are going up. Mortgage rates, yes, they did drop a little bit. And that's another thing, too. We see the powers that be still keeping the markets propped up. They're still buying bonds and keeping the mortgage rate suppressed. Right. But we also have to look at volume. Sales volume in homes is really plunged now to housing bubble 1.0 levels, and that's going to mean less economic activity. There's so many things in the economy that are tied to real estate and housing. So we're going to see a lot more layoffs going down the road here. The huge number of layoffs that we saw in January were just the tip of the iceberg. I think we're just getting started in this economic downturn. Now, some people say, JJ, you've been saying that for years. Where's the economic downturn? Well, remember what happened in 2020. In 2020, we should have witnessed a crashing real estate market, a crashing housing market, falling prices. We should have witnessed a crashing automobile market where prices of automobiles crashed because of everything being shut down. So what happened instead was we had all this intervention and manipulation that made prices go the opposite direction. Rents went up, home prices went up, vehicle prices went up. Why? Because of all the shutdowns. It was an artificial shutdown in the economy that created shortages. And we also had record money creation, and they threw trillions of dollars at the problem. And that created this false economic boom when there really should have been a bust. So if it was just free market fundamentals, prices would have crashed, the cost of living would have crashed. We would have witnessed massive deflation. Instead we saw, of course, we all know, inflation. All right. So bottom line is being aware of this news and the real situation with the economy can be beneficial, when you make your decision, when you're planning, when you're preparing. And occupations can be very volatile. Look at banking. Banking can be very volatile. We see a lot of banking layoffs. We see people in the real estate lending industry, a lot of layoffs. We see the tech industry, tons of layoffs here, especially recently. But other industries, other occupations, not so volatile. Look at government jobs. Government jobs are pretty stable. Jobs in the insurance industry are pretty stable. Speaking of the insurance industry, I read something pretty interesting. A lot of insurance companies are no longer insuring any of the following makes: Kia and Hyundai. Now, some companies are still covering them, but because the frequency of theft on those models is so high, Kia and Hyundai vehicles, they're choosing not to insure those vehicles. All right, so what's the story with that? I mean, are those vehicles really that much easier to steal? Or are there a lot of fake claims being put in because the vehicles aren't very good mechanically? So then people maybe pay somebody to go steal the vehicle for them so they can collect the insurance money, right? So a lot of things like that actually happen. And I read another report that people scamming insurance companies, fake claims and stuff like that, runs in the billions of dollars each year for insurance companies paying out phony claims. All right, so I'm not an insurance investigator. I don't know exactly what's happening, but it's very interesting that the insurance companies won't insure those vehicles. Also, rising crime. We talked about rising poverty, rising debt. deteriorating economy equals rising crime. So prepare for that as well, folks. As usual, keep stacking. You know what's going to be happening at the end of the day here. It's going to be sound money, hard assets coming back into the monetary system. We see lots of countries around the world getting away from the dollar, going back, moving back into hard money. Precious metals is going to be very important here going down the road here. In my opinion, silver is still the most undervalued asset here that people should be stacking, but also just survival food in case the banking system goes down, in case the trucks stop delivering food to stores. You only have a few days once that happens. What if we see a shutdown in the fuel supply with diesel running out and these deliveries not happening to stores? So prepare all across the board financially, um, from a survival perspective as well. Hope everybody liked this report. What do you think about those jobs numbers? Do you believe in those numbers, like the Tooth Fairy and the Easter Bunny sitting at the table playing cards? Do you believe that, or do you know that this is one big scam as far as the numbers that we're being fed? Like to hear from you down in comments. Thanks everybody for being here. Keep stacking. Big love. Bye for now and peace.